So, welcome to the Introverted Doctor podcast. This episode is actually an unexpected one because we're going to talk about COVID anxiety, returning back to work. And I have Dr. Jobin Verghese. He's the Chief Medical Officer. He's also a family physician. He's a site director at McMaster Family Medicine. He comes with a tremendous wealth of experience and knowledge. And I really would like folks to listen to where this conversation goes, because I think it's important. I was not expecting to do this episode this week. Welcome, Dr. Verghese.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure speaking with you. I mean, you and I have had the conversations over years since you had the podcast going, and I've been an avid listener of the podcast for a while. So it's a pleasure to finally be on.
Great to have you. Oh, one thing I forgot to mention is you're also part of the William Osler Health System. So, you know, your group of people do exceptional work. Now,
Absolutely.
Let's talk about your experience as a physician, a chief medical officer, and working in long-term care homes, because you've had the Army come in and step in, and there's been I think you've had more experiences than probably many family physicians, or even in the emergency room. Can you talk to that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think there's a couple of points on that. One is that our home actually, I was working as medical director on my other home within Holland Christian Homes Faith Manor. And when we recognized around March that it was pretty clear that we needed to start keeping a steel ring around long-term cares, it became very clear we needed to keep one physician per home so that we didn't risk cross-contaminating. And I was working with the administration very closely as medical director to try and see if we can ensure that we had the least amount of risk to our patients. And so we set up screening. We had a plexiglass screen back in early March. We were talking about doing active screening at that time. We were starting universal masking way before it became the huge. We were doing a lot of different things that were extremely preventative. However, the virus came into our home. It came very quickly, and it actually went through the home very quickly. We had many cases, I believe up to 50 in the end, of a 120-bed home. And we unfortunately have lost some of our patients to COVID. We had the Army come in because we had a severe issue with staff shortage. So we had many staff who actually contracted COVID, who recognized that we were a COVID positive unit and decided not to come to work. Some had symptoms. Some stated that their symptoms were present. Others stated that they were just not able to work. They were feeling too anxious. And so we continued to have issues with that. The Army came in and provided some services to help shore up some of our resources. They're continuing to be present today. We hope they'll continue to be present. We are working on our staffing, and I know our admin's working very closely with our human resources, and there's a lot of different struggles that are present with regards to that. And I think anyone who goes through COVID within long-term care, they'll recognize that, because staffing ratios, as we hear about in the news now, staffing ratios in long-term care has been a problem for a long time.
So, you know, in Ontario, where we are, where you and I both are, there is, you know, a wide variety of emotions. Some communities have been hit, some places have been hit, and then so it varies. And as we're slowly trying to open up, there is a sense of laxity. You know, some people, you know, if they haven't been affected, they feel, well, you know, let's open up, let's go, because there's real issues about staying closed. And then you've experienced the other end, where, you know, you were telling me about even the one patient whose leg became ischemic. How do we reconcile all that?
Well, I think it's hard, right? Because I think this is honestly going to be the one disease which is going to hit every single person in the world. Every single person will say, I know of somebody, or I know of a family who either lost a loved one or was severely ill. As you were mentioning, I have a patient that I've known that in a transfer from our home to the hospital, their leg became ischemic, and they ended up having significant issues with that, to a point where they were unable to. We were unable to do anything because of it, and it was perfectly fine within the home. And literally, the ambulance ride was all it took for that that leg to become ischemic. I think one thing that people aren't recognizing is that um, just because you don't have symptoms doesn't necessarily mean you don't have the virus. We know of this, and I think it's been well publicized now, at least, that there is a asymptomatic period that can be anywhere from 3 days, 5 days, to even as much as 14 days. So a good example would be that after Mother's Day, in the last 2 weeks, the global number of cases increased by 1 million. Clearly, this virus has not gone. That is globally, but I think that the fact is that people have talked about the virus as if it's just a flu, and that's still. I had my landscaper had told me the other day that that was exactly it. It said, "Well, it's just a flu, right?" And I've had nurses tell me who have had it. They said that they wish for death. So there is actually some significant morbidity with it. It is good that 80 to 90% of people do get better, but the fact is that this is a virus that will continue to affect us, and it's so new that we're still learning so much about it. People are still unsure about this idea of, are there fomites, are there not? CDC just put out their information that you can't contract it easily, but that doesn't necessarily mean you can't. And so I think that we need to continue to stay vigilant. I think that social distancing does work, and I think it is something we need to continue to push for.
So many people, though, are suffering other consequences. Their social isolation,
Yeah.
mental health, domestic abuse has gone up. Unfortunately, so has child abuse. So people are not coming to hospitals or seeing their family doctors because they're afraid of COVID. Are we just not trading one death for another? I mean, that's really one argument.
It's an interesting conversation. I think, interestingly, if you talk to people who have been in disaster zones of any kind, and that's really what this pandemic is it is a disaster. But if you talk to anyone within a post effects of a hurricane or of an earthquake or tsunami or anything, you'll actually hear that same information, that during the initial effects, there's a sharp increase in the amount of need for emergency care and frontline care that way. And then as the time goes on, it becomes more and more clear that primary care steps up as the main need. And so, speaking to the point of domestic violence, it's a very fair point, and it comes up all the time with disasters with regards to earthquakes, for example, because of the fact that people's adrenaline is high with the initial shocks, and then the after effects, your adrenaline never gets a chance to come down. That's similar to the effects we're feeling now, which is constant barrage of social media or media, always hearing the bad side of things, the fact that people aren't able to get out of it. There's a lot of great stories about how people are socially distancing and able to see their families. This is the sort of thing that will continue to be present. And I think it becomes very clear that we need to have all of our family doctors be very understanding that they need to really work on increasing access for their patients, whether that's virtually or in person, understanding that mental health, domestic violence, a lot of these depressive symptoms are going to be things that we can manage from a distance, while doing it quite effectively, because a lot of people have been able to communicate with their patients by phone, work with people over Zoom calls or other media calls.
Now, I think people are getting kind of tired of the word a new normal, or
Mm-hmm.
we just don't know what normal is anymore. We don't know what, and we're talking about now, we're looking at the discussions about second wave. We have so many varied opinions about it. How do we come up with solutions, problem, what, any suggestions?
I think the big thing is that this this fatigue of new normal is going to be something I think we need to be a marathon runner on, because that's going to be a conversation we're going to hear often. There will be a time that we're going to be talking about the the before COVID times, the after COVID times. This is a game changer. It will change a lot of the ways that we do things. And that will be the case for quite some time. And so I think the idea of what normal is an interesting concept in itself, because no matter what, anytime you do anything, there's a new normal. If somebody dies within your family, there's a new normal. If you have a new baby, you have a new normal. So I think what it comes down to is that we are adapted for change. That's how we've lived our lives. That's how we've grown as a civilization. We'll continue to adapt to what's new and what needs to be done. I think capitalism will continue to do what it needs to do, and I think people will be innovative, and it'll breed some extra information for all of us. I think we actually have already seen that people who have been saying for years, I could totally work from home, there's no reason for me to go to work, have actually, within a very short timeline, figured out I actually can do this, and that becomes the new normal. And now the question is going to be, is there a need to travel that distance for people who are traveling an hour both ways and losing 2 hours in their day just to commuting? Do they have to do that, or can they be more productive for 2 more hours?
But there are a lot of people, because of virtual work now and the way companies are working, there's a lot of layoffs. So that is one of the biggest things. How do you replace jobs? And the economy is so affected. I think that's I don't have any solution or comment about that.
I would vote for you if you did. I think honestly, it's one of the biggest things we're really going to have to look at, because we've known for quite some time that there's some jobs that are starting to phase out because of AI, because of robotics, because of computers, that I think these are the ones that are still at risk. And I would highly encourage all your listeners to really shore up your skills. There's a lot of different universities offering free courses that can be done during the time that people are kind of at home, whether they're trying to figure out what they can do with their time. Maybe not, there's a lot of people working on their sourdough bread, but maybe there's other tasks that can be done to try and help shore up those life skills to help with that. I think the bigger point, though, is that there is going to be a big conversation of how those layoffs look, what the government's going to do to help build skills for people who are in a new world where, again, this shift in what's going to happen virtually or what's going to happen in person. We've already seen it with different sectors.
Yeah. Well, last night I was talking to another friend of mine, and he basically said it clearly. You can live better if you choose better. And I think there's so much to think about. There's so much information. And I know what keeps me sane is just focusing on the little itty bitty things that I can do. And I really do think that people need to, instead of watching Netflix, going on their phone, is think about skills that can elevate their ability to earn and be more productive so that they are better. I think it really is about that.
I always tell my patients that there's a little bit of a triangle you always have to think about, right? Because when you want to find the motivation to do something, which then will show you results, which will give you more motivation, what ends up happening is that motivation doesn't come. So sometimes you just have to do something, which will give you results, which will then give you the motivation to do more.
Yeah.
And I agree with you wholeheartedly. I think that's a huge point, that when you see, oh gosh, I have to do all these different things. Sometimes it's just a matter of doing that first step. And then what you'll do what everybody does, which is after you take the first step, you'll then take the next step. And maybe it's a misstep, maybe not, but at least you'll be able to move forward.
And so much of it is exactly that. The energy that it takes to, say, turn on and watch a Netflix episode, the next step to do something more productive is really not that much more.
Right.
It's that initial inertia. And that's why I always say it's very important to have, people that will help you move forward, and setting up a buddy system, working on things, listening to podcasts. What are those little things that makes life successful? I mean, one of the best quotes I heard recently, inch by inch, life's a cinch, yard by yard, life becomes hard.
Yeah, and, absolutely right.
Well, Dr. Verghese, I want to thank you for taking the time for sharing this with me. period. Is there anything we should talk about more that we didn't cover?
Well, I just wanted to say I'm a big fan of the podcast. I actually wore my Conquer COVID-19 shirt
Oh, nice.
just in honor of your previous podcast with Haley Wickenheiser. So I think the Conquer COVID-19 movement was amazing, and I'm glad that it was there, and I want to do my little part. So I wore that just for that. I think the other thing, though, I would highly encourage that everybody understands is that another part of the new normal is going to become access. So in Ontario or in Canada alone, our access has always been an area that people struggle. People talk about all the time how hard it is to get into their family doctor, get into doctors in general. This is going to be worse, at least within the short term. And just understanding that this is going to be stuff that will need to be planned ahead of time. There are things that can be done early. And connecting with your family doctor in whatever way that is, whether it's virtually, whether it's leaving a message with their staff, whatever it is, allowing that sort of forward movement, that get rid of the inertia and make sure that things are moving forward, is going to be things that are useful, because there are parts that are out of your control. And I tell people on a daily basis that really and truly you can only control your actions and your words. Those two things, that's it. Mm-hmm. If it's outside of your actions and your words, you don't control it, you don't have actions on it, means you can't do anything about it. So it's so important to really take those 2 points.
I agree with you. And, one of the things that's been a challenge in a lot of family practices is that patients are afraid to come in. And we're really trying to encourage patients to call us and contact us. And we do take proper measures to make sure that if it is safe for you to come, we keep a clean, sterile environment. So, and I think we need to remind people we're trying to do that, but people are still afraid of coming in. But we don't want you not to come in if we don't think if we can't deal with things on the phone. So I think that's another important message, and also to go to the emergency room if you really need it. We don't want people to be dying of heart attacks and strokes at home because they're
That's exactly right.
so afraid of COVID-19.
And I'll send you some resources that I have with regards to the mental health side. There's a lot of different crisis lines. I'm sure your users have had them in the past, but there's some worldwide ones, there's some global ones, and there's some national ones as well that are useful.
That's good. And I will take a moment to plug that pandemic guidebook, which I wrote a few weeks back, which you said you quite found helpful, and a lot of people have been thankful. People have found that helpful, and so it's all. And I wanted to make it easy to read and usable, so that was a big thing for me to write that book, because there's so much information. It probably needs to be updated as we try to open up and return, but so it's probably should be developed further. But
well, I totally agree. I think that the idea of having a living document really allows people to have some freedom with it. So I would highly encourage people to review it. I agree it probably can work on some updates, but I think over time it's going to be something that will be almost crowdsourced or used by a large group, and I think that will help.
So what about, we're opening up, and some people feel that we're just now that we're opened up the first stage, but really now we're back to normal.
Yeah, so there's a big thing there where they actually did a survey recently, and they found that most people are actually agreeing with the way that at least Ontario is doing their opening and their pace and their methodical nature that they're doing things currently. About 30% of people are actually wanting to do things slower, but there's only about 14% of people who are saying that they would like to see things quicker. I think the fact is that we know that whatever effect you have now, you won't see it until a week or 2 weeks from now. So the shop owner who opens their door and says day one was great, then really we won't know that effect until 2 weeks from then.
One of the challenges is that every region is so different. So if you're not having any problem in your region, or you think you're doing good, then life is great.
Right. And actually, it's really interesting because had I not had Grace Manor's experience, I probably would have felt very similarly. I know that a lot of my colleagues have said that within the hospital systems, it hadn't been too bad early on. Now it's getting busier. one of the benefits of having a smaller community is that idea we can collaborate. And I was thrilled to be able to work with William Osler in helping our as many patients as possible with some work with some of the COVID patients, because our nursing home was overrun, but the hospital was a little bit lighter. We were able to work with that. And so that sort of experience was something that I think, as we continue to see cases, could be something that other areas could consider reaching out to or working on, because it really did help not only the nursing home in when it was busiest, but also the hospital as it got busier, with that idea of bringing back the patients to help improve the capacity of the hospital.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much. And thank you for taking the time out of your schedule and doing this. I really do appreciate this. Thank you.
It's my absolute pleasure. Thank you so much.
If you enjoyed this podcast, please share it with your family, friends, or colleagues, because there's some very valuable information of somebody who's really been in the hard part and the thick of things with Dr. Verghese, and he's exceptionally knowledgeable. He is very fair, and he's not an alarmist, but I really think he knows. He's a very calm voice in all of this, so I think this is very helpful. Thank you so much for listening, and I will see you again next week. Take care.